How do we navigate this level of disruption and uncertainty? And honestly, that's where I'm going in my flow. It's conscious leadership. It's understanding how to show up completely present and available to what is actually in front of you. The best way for us to be able to adapt and stay resilient so we can find the opportunities for growth buried in this adversity is when we show up in alignment. Welcome to the Leadership Launchpad Podcast, the Legacy Edition, where conscious leaders unite to unlock their highest potential so collectively we can change the way the game is being played. Welcome to the Leadership Launchpad Podcast, the Legacy Edition. That's right, folks. You heard me. We are showing up here July 1st, right on the doorstep of summer 2025 with our latest evolution here at the LLP, which I am so excited to roll out to you today. Before I dive into any of what this latest chapter is going to represent, what this is all going to be about, I want to introduce my newest co-host, Tracey Allen. Tracey Allen, you have seen on this show twice before. Our folks love her. So as everybody knows, we are in the year of co-creation, and we've been asking for feedback from you, our cherished audience. And some of the feedback that I actually was receiving was that it would be so cool to see you actually co-host with one of your all-time favorite guests or clients. This is why I'm so excited to bring Tracey in the co-host seat. She is a dear friend of mine. She actually came through my door for the first time 5 years ago as a client when she first stepped into her 2.0 legacy leadership shoes. She has decades of experience as a leader herself, decades in the procurement side of big business and big corp. She now leads and is the head of real estate at Nokia. And she brings such a depth and breadth of expertise, not only in terms of her corporate leadership skills and expertise, but also on this whole side of Leadership 2.0. She's been one of our biggest champions on this mission. So I can hardly wait for you all to see what comes out of our co-creation this summer. Tracey, welcome to the show as a co-host for the first time, girl. How does that feel?
So excited. So excited. I've always wanted to have my own podcast, and this is like even better to do it with you. So I'm super excited. And the topics we're going to be talking about and the mission that we've both been on kind of side by side, you bringing me along, and it didn't take me too long to get on board. And I'm super excited to share with everybody and our guest how amazing you are, because you are usually the person that is interviewing all these wonderful guests. But I think we're missing out on all the offerings you bring and the impacts you have. And I can't wait to dig into that with you. So thank you for having me.
I feel so honored and privileged to have you riding shotgun on this latest evolution of the LLP. I know that you are one of the most valuable people that I have in my corner that helps me point out blind spots like these. I've been doing this show for 5 years now, basically the whole time I've known you, and you brought to my attention, yeah, I'm always showcasing my guests and knowing what questions to ask them to pull their brilliance out of them and their golden nuggets. But yeah, I think you're right. After 20 years in practice, I definitely love the idea of bringing people behind the curtain into the conditions of what happens in a session with somebody like you and I. That absolutely was a blind spot. So thank you for helping me illuminate it.
Happy I could.
So this latest chapter that's really in alignment with how we are trying to innovate here at Team Elite, this is why we're in a year of co-creation, has really been inspired by my own evolution and growth. In the last couple of years, I've been really doubling down on my consciousness training. I know you've heard that word showing up on the play here in 2025 just a little bit. And so, yeah, I think this is the feedback that I'm getting with my clients in the trenches. They've been saying to me lately, Susan, this is like a Leadership 3.0 session. What is this latest style and evolution of your coaching that is so impactful? And I think it's the best way to describe it is this real inspiration in and around conscious leadership. So that is what we want to break down today in terms of what conscious leadership even means, but also in terms of why Tracey and I feel like this is very much how we're going to change the way this game is being played from this point beyond. We've been talking so much on this show about how much uncertainty there is in the world right now. And just, yeah, those are the conversations I'm having in the trenches, right? Is how do we navigate this level of disruption and uncertainty? And honestly, that's where I'm going in my flow. It's conscious leadership. It's understanding how to show up completely present and available to what is actually in front of you. Sure, it might look different. It might require different things, but the best way for us to be able to adapt and stay resilient so we can find the opportunities for growth buried in this adversity is when we show up in alignment, which to me means that we really are consciously pulling from a space and place of knowing what our values are, those things that inform our sense of purpose as leaders, and really making sure we're also in alignment with our greatest gifts and skills and strengths and talents and attributes, so that we can bring all of those resources that were put in us for a reason towards that which is showing up in front of us, I believe, for a reason, right? Because we're meant to create something new. Conscious leadership is where new choice comes from. It doesn't come from showing up unconsciously running on the pre-existing hardwire of the patterns and programs of yesterday. It requires that we're actually making new, innovative decisions.
Everybody has, like you said, their parts, and everybody is triggered by different aspects or different situations, and having compassion and empathy for their situation or where they're coming from is really, really important, and is something that we don't do or really kind of talk about in the corporate world, which has been a huge tool for me to be able to understand and have compassion for maybe people putting other people in bad situations, or minimizing or shaming people, or whatever the situation might be. And I think that it is really important that yes, we are in business to make money. That's what the corporate world is all about, right? But we can do it with grace and with respect.
So Trace, what is your whole take on this? Because I know you're right there shoulder to shoulder with me right now in your own consciousness training. So what does consciousness or conscious leadership mean to you? And why do you agree with me that this is the space and place us leaders need to be right now?
Yeah, and I'll give a little bit of not a history lesson on it, but leadership means a lot of things to many people. And I think what there's a lot of leaders everywhere in the world, and they all behave differently, and I wouldn't say that a lot of them probably run on autopilot in most of the choices and decisions in the way that they're showing up for their people every day. And I think what we try to talk about in the work we do is around kind of deconstructing maybe the autopilot and being actually reframing and restructuring some of the wiring that we have so that we can actually make different choices, because that autopilot is not easy to destroy without doing the work, which is what you and I've spent a few years doing, right? And so that's like a little bit of the step that you take to do that. But then it's very easy and simple to fall back into, even if I look back a year ago, I was making, even though I knew better that, I knew my values, I knew how to step in, I was triggered and not able to move that forward in a different, with some different actions. What conscious leadership to me means is even a step further, which is actually, and I catch myself doing this, is taking the time to think about what decision should I make in this situation. When my daughter is yelling at me because she's being a spoiled brat or whatever issues happening at home, do I react this way or do I react that way? And in the past, I would just react the way I knew, which was, in the day-to-day, some of the surface decisions you make, maybe you were doing some of that digging, but you couldn't do it all the time, and you can't do it all the time. But where it matters, that's where I have to take a step back and say, this is going to have major consequences. This is going to impact her in this way. What decision do I go right or do I go left? And that to me is like next level of what we've been talking about, because it's actually taking maybe 60% of my decisions in the day and actually thinking about them and actually making a conscious decision that this is the impact I want to have on this individual. And in the workplace, we don't have time to do all that, but I am so now conscious in the way that I show up for my people. And sometimes it's not easy. And sometimes there's a lot of pressure. But I always say, I will be fair and I will be tough, but always with respect and love. And that's a decision that I have to make. But sometimes things can get really, really hot. And I need to step back and make a choice, because I care about my people. And just because I know what my values are, it just doesn't equate that, I will make the right choice without actually being conscious, without actually thinking about it, without actually reflecting and saying, this is what this person deserves. This will impact them in a positive way. This is going to be what motivates them, and like unwinding that in like a few seconds to be able to come up and show up. And that to me is what is that next level of leadership 2.0 we've been talking about, which I worked really hard to show up in that way, but this is even, I would say, even deeper than that. And that's what, like, I feel it just will have and is having such a bigger impact in me staying authentic to who I am.
Yeah, I think that's the magic word right there, is you staying authentic to who you really are versus the parts in our personality that can get triggered. We talk about the systems thinking based modality that we use in our practice here at Team Elite called IFS, Internal Family Systems. And this whole model is all about how whenever we get challenged in high pressure situations where the stakes are high, it's quite natural and the most human thing for these parts of our personality that are designed for protection to get triggered, right? This is where we get upregulated in our stress responses because, our protective parts are driven by fear. But to be able to be conscious of that, because of course, we're all going to get triggered. There's no conscious leader out there that's just walking around in this idyllic halo of an experience all day long. That is absolutely not the goal. But to be conscious, present, and available to witnessing the stories that come up, right, in these parts when they get triggered, and then being able to actually use these types of frameworks, which we're absolutely going to expose and go deep with in this round of the LLP, is what helps us come back into our authenticity. And that really is what alignment is, right? Am I self-led, not parts-led in terms of my protector parts, but actually at the helm, which to me is a metaphor for being in our power, so that we can pivot from feeling powerless, which is why our defense systems go up, right, to feeling powerful, meaning that we can make really empowered decisions that are absolutely going to move the needle forward in a direction that is in alignment with why we believe we're here and what we believe matters most in regards to why we're here and the impact that we seek to have. Not perfectly, because again, that's not the expectation. But like progressionally, understanding where those opportunities for growth and new decision making are showing up on the play. The other thing I love about what you've kind of broken down and described is like when we actually go from being reactive in our protector parts, type of self-leadership to being responsive 2.0 leaders. I think that this absolutely is so powerful because that's what then starts to set the conditions for our people to actually step into that as well. And this is where we want to go with this round of interviews with the guests that we want to bring in and the conversations that you and I are going to have. It's to really contextualize how this type of mindset strategy can make an impact and make a significant difference in real-time situations Yes, even in corporate spaces. I know people are looking at me like, sure, Susan, it's easy to be so autonomous and free and conscious in your leadership when you're an entrepreneur because you have all of that when you run your own business. But this is very much relevant to the corporate condition as well. And that's something that I really want to demystify because a
Mhm.
lot of the pushback we get on our mission, right, is like, oh, human centric, okay, like soft skills, okay, and it's like, you're the perfect person to talk about this, Trace, in terms of just like how this shows up on the play when you are having to navigate the toughest challenges that show up in a corporate condition in 2025.
Yeah.
Anything you would add to that before we just really start to set some expectations for what this next chapter is going to look like for us this summer?
Oh, I think that's great. And I think I would just say that, at the end of the day, it's everybody has, like you said, their parts, and everybody is triggered by different aspects or different situations. And having compassion and empathy for their situation or where they're coming from um, is really, really important, and is something that we don't do or
Mm-hmm.
really kind of um, talk about in the corporate world, which
Mm-hmm.
has been a huge tool for me to be able to understand and have compassion for maybe people putting other people in bad situations, or minimizing or shaming people, or whatever the situation might be. And I think that it is really important that, yes, we are in business to make money. That's what the corporate world is all about, right? But we can do it with grace and with respect. And I think that's, for me, my passion and mission in this whole exercise is that, and why I'm here, is to help change that in these big companies, because at the end of the day, we're all human
Mm-hmm.
and we all have needs, and they all need to be met some way, form, at home, at work. But at the end of the day, there's just such a better way of like leading with like care and compassion and inspiration. And it doesn't have to be the hard way because we want to make a buck. Because we all are here to make a buck at the end of
Mm-hmm.
the day, right? And we all, have families, or have friends, and we know how to act with them. Why is it different when we go to work? So that's my mission for me, is like, it's just getting that out there to the corporate world, because I think we can really, really change that. And I think it's needed. I see my people and I see people suffer through that. And
Yeah.
it's not fun.
Well, that's what I really can't wait to expose is your just perspective on how useful this is right
Mhm.
now when your people, you see them struggling with the uncertainty. This is why we're talking about it because you're one of the people that I go to put my finger on the pulse. I see it in the locker rooms that we're working on with your people. It's like there's a ton of uncertainty, and we know that triggers the amygdala, and we know that's where people's defense systems go up. And we also know what that does to our cognitive capacity, our ability to collaborate and create. You can't be creative when you're in a protective state, And I think this is everything that you're so passionate about, especially working in the tech space, right? Is like, not only is this good for our people, is this humane? Is this, learning to find the grace in terms of the situations that our people are navigating that are so freaking tough? But this is absolutely going to drive the best business outcomes amongst the uncertainty too, because where your people can feel safe. And that's exactly what they're going to feel if you lead with empathy. That one move that you just referred to right there packs so much punch in terms of power and ripple affecting that empowerment into your people's experience. When your people feel safe, that's where they can open up and give you the best of their ideas. That's where they can contribute the most of the value they have to bring to that table. And I'm sorry, but that's the best your business is ever going to do in a disruption that's this ripe, right? And I think I love these future generations that are going to come up and soon replace us in this station of leadership because they
Mhm.
totally get that. That's why we can't lead our kids the way that our parents led us, which is something we're also passionate about talking about. Yeah, but I think it is like to me, I just know from being a high performance athlete, like when I got on the ice, I always would say to myself, drop down in your skates, Hobson, because I was taught, if I'm up in my head and in my parts, try to control, I'm on the ice. I'm behind the play. I'm making mistakes. But when I dropped down in my skates, which to me was like just like an anchor statement that I would use for really just being present and in my body, I knew that's where my intuition would take the wheel. I knew that's where I'd be able to read and react and adapt in those high stakes, high pressure, but really fast conditions. I knew that's when I was going to do my best work, when I was fully present and at the helm. And that's something that we just can't wait to make the case for all of our leaders right now, because I think it's the hardest thing for them to trust. When I'm in the trenches coaching leaders all damn day, this is the work that I am doing the most, is teaching them how to trust what our body has always known about where we're going to thrive, how we're going to thrive, whatever's going on around us. So this is absolutely, you can sense the heat coming through these airways right now. Tracey and I have been riffing on and concocting this idea for the last month or so. We have so many ideas downloading into our intuition that we can't wait to share with you. But just to manage your expectations about how this latest chapter is going to go down in terms of the format, we're going to play with a format where she and I do what we just described. I'm going to pull the curtains back and really illuminate. This is what I love about bringing Tracey on the mic for you all, is I just said she has depth and breadth in her well of wisdom. And I can't wait to shine the flashlight on her level of consciousness, because I think that that's one of the best ways for our leaders to gain inspiration to want to go on this type of up-leveling mission in terms of their mindset work. And then you're going to turn the tables on me, like you just said. And you have anything secret in up the sleeve that I should know about, or?
No, but I do have a question. I think our audience, and I'm curious, I know we've kind of talked about it in our conversations, but I think it's important for our guests to know, like, what brought you to this place now? What's the inspiration to really go deep into the consciousness leadership? And you've been working on yourself. You're always working on yourself, but I would say probably last year you've been doing some deep work and reconciliation with some, I won't go into it, but some stuff. And I want you to share with the guests, like, why you feel called to kind of share that with everybody and what inspired you to do that.
Well, this is one of the moments where I feel like I don't maybe often go here in terms of like where all this comes from for me. But yeah, the way that I've been in this game 20 years doing this coaching thing in my practice as a high performance coach, a high performance leadership coach. But when it all started for me was when I just couldn't wait to be able to share with people just like me, who I knew, my high achievers. I always say it takes one to coach one, because nobody would believe what's actually going on behind the gates of the high achiever mindset. Looks like striving, feels like surviving on the inside of their bodies, right? It is totally parts led in terms of how we lead ourselves. We are leading ourselves from, we think it's motivation, that hyper arousal in our nervous system, but it's not. It's anxiety, it's stress. But yeah, I've always, the way I've developed my methodology is by, I needed this. And so I went and tried these different modalities. I found that this really works for me, and I think it'll resonate with you too. And I've continued, like you said, I'm always, working on my growth game. And so as I've continued to evolve and scale my offerings in terms of, the different modalities that I've integrated along the way, that's what I've done. I've always brought the things that have worked for me, experienced that first, because I think when you share from a space and place of experiential understanding, just how powerful something is, that's a real felt experience for people. And my clients, I think that's where that trust comes from, is they know I've been in the trenches. They know I've been up against the same pressure, stakes, challenges that they have. And then there's a lot of, there's a lot of proof and evidence in the fact that I'm saying, and this worked for me, I think it'll work for you too. And so, yeah, I've been really doubling down on this latest chapter of my consciousness training which includes all kinds of different spiritual modalities and healing modalities. And I think where I've really arrived at this space and place of time, which is not lost on me, because we're going through all kinds of evolution here at Team Elite, just like our clients are in their businesses. And I'm really just understanding how powerful it is for me to be able to integrate some of what I've really been able to experientially let go of, release, unhook from, and I think that's why I set the anchor word this year for expansiveness, is because that's really been the result of this consciousness training for me. Is it's opened up so much more capacity because of how much more free I feel, having understood some of the depths of reconciliation that have been made possible by my consciousness training. And not only that, in terms of like the elevation that I'm experiencing in my consciousness, but it's the level of creativity that has started to be possible for me as a practitioner that has me so inspired. I haven't felt this inspired in like probably since the pandemic. When we first were going into that chapter of how we were going to show up with all these different locker room programs, that was my big innovation during that time of challenge and adversity. But this chapter really is like it's this getting back to where it all started when I was on the ice, dropping down in my skates and really just trusting the flow of what I'm creating in experiments like this, giving myself permission to try all kinds of new things in terms of our offerings, which has me so freaking excited. And I can see the impact of that because my clients are feeding it back to me like, whoa, like who is this? And what level of coaching is that? This is like, we don't recognize this version of what we've been doing all these years, And so, yeah, I'm so, so, so excited to be able to ripple effect that out to our audience. I know this is just the intro. We don't want to take up too much more of your time, but yeah, I think that's where this is coming from for me, is like the level of intuitive downloads I'm getting and where that's taken me to in terms of some of the things I want to create. It has me so fired up. And of course, that's why I want to channel that through the mic for our peeps.
I love it. Yay.
Thank you for asking. So we're so clearly fired up for y'all. This is going to be one hot summer here at the LOP, the Legacy Edition. The expectation here is that it's going to be us really turning the flashlight on each other's experience 1 week, and then we'll slide on over to getting some of our amazing legacy leadership guests on the mic, because I really want to illuminate that level of consciousness too for our people to gain exposure to. I think all of that is going to be so resourceful for you to spend your summer months on the dock listening to, out on the paddle boards, maybe listening to. But yeah, last place I want to land our folks today is we are still in the year of co-creation, and it is clearly working for us here at the Leadership Launchpad Podcast. And so we want to hear from you. How's this new chapter resonating? Do you have any thoughts or ideas or feedback for us? Is there anything you would like for us to explore in terms of some of the guests we're bringing in for you to gain access to this summer? Please send me an email, susan@elitehighperformance.com. I love hearing from our people. You are the why factor behind it all for Tracey and I. Tracey, is there anything else you'd like to leave our audience with today?
Oh, I think I'm looking forward to it. And I was just thinking we talked about this, but the guests we're going to be bringing on, I mean, if you ever put a mic and record what Susan and I talk about, it's ridiculous about the directions we can go in, and we love everything, and nothing is like a no. We love to explore so many different growth areas, and we'll get lost and go down rabbit holes and different topics. So anything goes. So if you have anything interesting that you want to explore and you would like us to try to tap into, we have time this summer. We'll do that for you, and we'll bring those guests on and help you fill that gap you're looking to. And I'm sure Susan and I will probably get on that board too and start going down that rabbit hole. So I look forward to having a great summer of growth and expansion and just sharing, experiences that we both and everybody is looking for. And I think it's going to be so much fun. So I'm so excited.
There's so much fun to be had in this co-creation thing that we've been riffing on all year. You really are the inspiration behind this all. So of course we need your voice to contribute to this collaboration effort. We want to know what you're thinking about, what you're curious about, what you're up against. This is how you just heard I created my whole methodology along the way, right? So yeah, please, please, please send us a note if you have any ideas in regards to that. The last request I have is please share this episode with anyone out there in your circle, in your tribe that you feel needs to go on this mission alongside us, that is already on the mission to try to change the way the game's being played in their own legacy leadership lanes. We know that this podcast chapter of the LOP is really going to have a huge impact, and all of that is going to be possible through all of you. So please, please help us change the game by sharing this with a friend. Don't forget to hit like or subscribe on your way out. That's it. That's all for this week. We're going to have a great conscious leader in for you as our guest next time. We're so excited to bring her in and introduce her to all of you. That's it. That's all. Thank you so much for continuing to tune in and be on this ride alongside us. Your highest potential is literally our passion, Tracey and I, and we cannot wait to unleash it together this summer. We'll see you all next week.